Hi everyone, it's Swank Ivy again with another Letters to an Asexual, and this is number 107. Today I regret to bring to you a rather long piece from someone who said some pretty bigoted things, and in giving this a platform, I don't want to give this much attention to a perspective like this, except that I want people to understand that bigotry within the queer community is a thing. Thankfully, this is a post that's, I think, more than a decade old, and you don't see as much of this anymore, but it does still exist, and it's not always just knee-jerk stuff or really obvious like a lot of the TERFs that are out there, you know. These days it's really easy to see certain kinds of bigots based on the kinds of dog whistles that they put out there. But this was someone's very nuanced attempt to make a case for why asexual people don't belong in the queer community. And if you have read the book that I wrote around the same time, and you had any discomfort with the section that I put in there about the intersection of non-asexual queer communities and the ace communities, you may understand it a little better when you know that this was kind of what the culture was in that time. There was a lot more direct opposition to us, and it was really hard to come across inclusive queer communities in those days. You would almost always run into someone like the person that I'm going to read this from. And I do want to warn you that there's some language in here and some perspectives in here that may be disturbing. Of course, there's the ace phobia, and there's some just essentialism in it. There's some some language that could be considered a slur, and there are some perspectives in here about sexism and sexual assault, and I may also just want to tell you that one of the things that was floating around in some of these communities at the time was the acronym GSM for gender and sexuality minorities was being used as shorthand by a lot of people. I don't know how popular that is these days. I actually haven't seen a lot of it lately. But I think that this person was seeing that term being brought forward as a more inclusive way to talk about everybody, basically, who is not cis and straight. And this person's perspective is essentially that asexual people don't deserve the support of the queer community. So I'm going to give you, unfortunately, this long comment that this person made. And then I'm also going to give you my response to it, and hopefully that will counter some of the perspectives that this person is spewing. And if you've ever encountered this in your own life, hopefully some of the things that I said to them can be helpful in forming your own arguments. So here we go. This person's title was Sexuality and Why Asexuals Are Not Oppressed or Queer. So, feeling the need to vent some thoughts, the whole GSM thing pisses me off, and this has been brewing for some time anyway. So here goes a wall of text. I'm 27 years old. I realized I was a lesbian less than a year ago. Before then, I identified as bisexual for about 10 years, admitting my attraction to women, to myself and others, but not fully realizing it. I in no way think bisexuality is just a stepping stone to being gay or lesbian, though I think it is seen that way and used that way because figuring out your sexuality is really fucking hard in a default straight world. I grew up in the first state to allow gay marriage in the US, and yet I couldn't figure out till I was 26 that I was a lesbian and had absolutely no attraction to men. I grew up disabled in a dysfunctional alcoholic family. I went to Catholic church on Sunday and Catholic school until I graduated high school. I was taught the Catholic stance on homosexuality, which is to accept the person as gay, but it was a burden and never to act on it. I never really dated. My sexual experience is minimal. And I can list only 2 boyfriends, and that was 7 years ago. Some might consider me asexual, but I know better. I know what's holding me back, and it isn't a lack of sexual attraction or drive. It's society. I grew up around straight people. I was raised as if I was a straight person. I was taught to be a straight person. I was taught that if I was gay, that's okay, just don't act on it. I grew up around homophobia, even though my parents were accepting of my bisexual and later lesbian identity. I was surrounded by people who would say things like, gay people are okay as long as they don't hit on me, or gay sex is gross. And let's not forget the sexism with vaginas are gross, and so much more. I internalized a lot of this shit for years, not realizing I was just hating myself. I look at my life now, at 27, and realize I don't know how to date, how to meet people, how to connect. I've grown complacent in my loneliness, but I never stop wanting to meet that special someone who I know now could only be a woman. I'm stunted sexually because I grew up in a default straight society that didn't want any gay people fucking, and a sexist society that told me to be a virgin or I'm a slut. This is why the homophobia and appropriation by the asexual community pisses me the fuck off. Not only that, when I see asexuality posts from teens who are so sure they know they're asexual, I can only wonder what their experiences are that they are shutting themselves out from ever truly learning. Accepting and embracing a label that, as far as I can see, does what a lot of sexists and homophobes want. I wonder that because I almost thought I was asexual too. However, luckily, I never stopped learning, and my thirst for knowledge helped me figure things out, as well as my experiences. I also stopped trying to be right about everything, and instead tried to listen and continue learning. Truth is not absolute, and holding that belief dear helped me listen to other LGBT people and realize, holy shit, I'm not alone. I'm just like them, and I know who I am now. All those confusing thoughts about being a lesbian and what it meant was answered, because I knew it wasn't just an identity, but a journey. And there were people there with me. I'm still figuring this out, but I have help now. You have to learn who you are. Sometimes the answers come easy, sometimes they don't. Especially if you have prejudice and misunderstanding in your way. To quote Ellen DeGeneres, what I'm saying is that when you're older, most of you will be gay. This shared experience of oppression that varies in many degrees is what makes the LGBT community a community. It's why so many of us are saying as loud as we can, no to straight people. We have the right to our own community. We fought and died for our rights and for our queer spaces. Yes, there may be divisions within, but we share the same queer label thrown at us in hatred, the same history of oppression, and whether we embrace that label or not, we sure as shit get to tell someone who is not queer to stop taking our identity. Believe it or not, I do not have a problem with asexuality as an identity. Claim it if you want. But what I have a problem with is asexuals trying to use that identity to appropriate queer without any consideration to the history and usage as a slur. I have a problem with straight asexuals talking about coming out as if they face the same risk of being disowned and abandoned like we do. I have a problem with asexuals claiming LGBT people have sexual privilege over them, when the basic reason for all of homophobia is that people don't want us to fuck. We are threatened, hated, beaten, raped, and killed for who we want to love and have sex with. In no way do we have any sexual privilege. Furthermore, in no way is asexuality an oppression. I don't care how the fuck you define it, but being someone who is not sexually active is actually the desired society in this fucked up world. In this sexist world, women should be saving themselves for marriage, for that special someone looking at you demisexuals in your ridiculous label. And if we don't, we're sluts and whores. In the homophobic world, they don't want to know about us. Lesbians are not real. We just need a good deep dicking. They're upset too much by the way we fuck. And then, some straight people think they're being magnanimous by accepting us, but not wanting us to act on our devious desires, or just not say anything because it's gross. Please, asexuals, tell me how the fuck you can claim queer when the worst you get is misunderstanding and erasure. And yes, I'm quite aware of corrective rape, which happens to asexuals and lesbians, and for many other reasons. That has more to do with sexism and rape culture than specifically asexuality or even homosexuality. The point of all of this is, yes, you have an identity, sure. You can make a community to share experiences and get support, but stop trying to fucking appropriate ours. Get your fucking own! And stop saying sexist and homophobic shit, and straight people just shut the fuck up. My response. So, what I'm hearing here are the following points. It took you a long time to figure out your sexuality. Therefore, anyone who figures things out early in their lives is not only probably wrong, but deserves to be called ridiculous and get denied by you. Ignoring, of course, that straight teenagers experience straight attraction very young, pursue it, and never get told they're too young to know they're straight. There's a virgin or slut dichotomy that made you confused about what you felt. Never mind that it's a double-edged sword, which causes both virgins and sluts to be mocked. If you think that being abstinent is universally heralded as pure and righteous, you need to stick your head outside your bubble a little. Teens accepting the asexual label early will make them shut down and not explore themselves? Yeah, sure. It's not like sexuality is described as one of the most compelling motivating factors in life, and it's not like wanting to have sex while hiding that you want to have sex ruins reputations, from everyday marriages to the integrity of the President of the United States. How about instead of mocking everyone who feels asexual in their teens, you realize that some of them will come to a different conclusion when they're adults and some of them won't, and that neither group needs to be dismissed and othered by you. You yell no to straight people and then act like it's obvious asexual people are just straight prudes who need to get the fuck out. What we're saying if we identify with being queer is that asexuality does not equal normative sexuality, and in some people's minds, that is inherently queer. That's it. Our issues are different from yours in some ways, but we are not having the straight experience just because some of us aren't gay. You think asexual people must not realize that queer was a slur and that gay people are oppressed. Do you have any idea how often lack of sexuality is compared to not actually being human? How often asexual is used to talk about how cold and weird and unfeeling somebody is? These people are not kidding. We do know what it feels like to have words used against you, and many of us come from places where not being straight and not marching to the status quo is not acceptable. Being asexual is not like being a celebrated, respected virgin. Most of us are not any more ignorant about queer oppression than the average gay people our age, and some of us who are out have directly experienced it. You're holding us to different standards than you would gay people struggling with their identity and deciding to embrace queer. What is it that's making you assign us the cluelessness? You think you don't have sexual privilege because you're attacked for your relationships. No, sexual privilege does not mean you're privileged for your gay identity. It means there are certain givens and certain things you take for granted when you can relate to others sexually in a sexual world. There are also certain elements of straight privilege that affect asexuals as well as gay people, sometimes in different ways. If you think someone who doesn't have sex is the actual desired state in this world, based on being raised to think gay people weren't supposed to have sex, you're demonstrating exactly how little you know about our experience. And here you are telling us we're not oppressed, enough in ways you can personally see as an outsider, so therefore we're actually pissing you off and disgusting you by wanting fellowship. Don't you see something inherently wrong with that? I mean, I know you're denying that we have any problems because you perceive that we don't have yours, but honestly, people usually develop the ability to listen to each other about different experiences moving through the world instead of stomping on them because you're just that convinced we can't be having an oppressive experience without it being your oppressive experience. Or at least it has to be minimized and drawn up as not as bad, therefore asexuals are whiners. Really? Gay people are threatened, hated, beaten, raped, and killed for who they want to love? I know, and it's horrible. You're aware that asexuals are threatened, hated, beaten, raped, and killed for not wanting to love the way someone else wants them to, right? You want to know why we can claim queer if nothing bad ever happens to us because of our sexuality, determining that a certain level of oppression has to happen to define queer. I see. Queerness is dependent on oppression. And when and if it were to stop, there would be no such thing as queerness. Well, we tell you over and over what happens to us as a result of misunderstanding, erasure, and other ridiculous experiences. But what can we possibly do about it if you refuse to listen? You ask us to tell you. And when we tell you, you say it either isn't happening or isn't that bad from outside our experience. Go on, tell us how great we have it. Tell us how our relationships look to you from outside. Tell us that how we feel about sex necessitates us getting out of here and getting your own space, and stop making me look at it. You God, you people are annoying. It stops being your problem if we just go away and talk to ourselves and stop expecting anyone else to hear and understand, right? That was where the conversation ended, and the person didn't engage with me. The post was responded to by quite a lot of people, most of whom did not agree with the original poster, and most of them saw it as completely unnecessary for there to be a rivalry between our communities. I've said it before, but there's so much overlap between asexual communities and non-asexual queer communities. Like, we have the same issue with being harmed by heteronormativity, and even though you can sometimes make an argument for less overt violence being directed toward us as a group, partly because of erasure, partly because they don't even really know what it is, and partly because of, you know, some religious and societal perspectives on homosexuality, and also certain gender identities. A lot of trans people experience violence because of these sorts of perspectives too. That they can't imagine that anybody would react with violence to someone like us, who they like to draw us up as being people who abstain from sex, which is obviously, that's not what defines asexuality necessarily, and it's not even true for some asexual people. There are plenty of asexual people who do have sex. So basically, since this time, I think there has been a really positive push for inclusion in for asexual people to be accepted as a matter of course in a lot of LGBT plus groups. But there are still people who just fundamentally don't get it and may disagree with this, and I really wish that we could have conversations about it that didn't start with somebody saying, oh, but your identity's ridiculous and my struggle was this particular way, so I can't imagine that yours wasn't like this. These assumptions, these centering of your own identity and experiences as definitive for an entire community just is not helpful. It's not compassionate, and it doesn't lead to better understanding. And I have to say, just, I've learned so much from listening to experiences that, you know, non-asexual gay people or non-asexual trans people have had that I can't share. And it's also maybe not shocking, but a little eye-opening sometimes to hear that sometimes when they talk about their experiences, I've experienced something very similar on a slightly different axis, and I relate to them because of these things. You know, it's just like I said, if you're both being harmed by heteronormativity, you know, the same expectations that may tell a gay person that the ideal for them would be, okay, well, accept that you're gay, but don't have sex, that the same perspectives are going to push people who say those things to them to say to us, well, you know, you're not really going to be happy in life if you don't take a mate and have children. Or they may come from a religious perspective and say, well, the Bible says that you should be fruitful and multiply. And there are plenty of things that are used against us that come from the same stuff. And sometimes it's identical, of course, and the most obvious place for that to come from is in the places that our communities overlap, because I know a hell of a lot of asexual people who are trans, a hell of a lot of asexual people who are same-sex attracted or non-binary or attracted to more than one gender. So it really is absurd to suggest that asexual people are just left alone in society as if we're just, oh, you're not a threat and I don't think you're weird and I don't really care about you. Some of my other videos have examined the dichotomy where half of the detractors will say, why are you talking about this? This isn't important. Nobody cares enough about whether you have sex to have a problem with you. And then the other half of the detractors are all the people who have a problem with us. And they try to tell us it's not natural, which is something we hear for presumably abstaining, and gay people will hear because they'll say you're not supposed to have sex with the same sex. Comes from the same root, applies slightly differently, but we can both understand that, we can both share that. And also, I don't know how clear it was in the phrasing that I used, but I do think that queerness should not be defined by who is harming you or how much you've been harmed. I think that's a really dangerous perspective to say that an identity depends on who hates you. And I do agree that there's a certain amount of experiencing oppression or having fear about whether you can be yourself that tends to be part of the queer experience. And part of the reason I think that is that I have experienced that as an asexual person entirely because of being an asexual person. But I still think that it would be wrong to say that the oppression is definitive of queer identity, and that it would really be a mistake to rank somebody's oppression level to decide whether they've been hurt enough to deserve fellowship. So that is where I'm going to leave this one. I hope it makes sense, and I hope it wasn't too depressing to hear that there are people who think like this. And if it helps at all for encouragement, you should know that I have seen the trend over the last 10 years or so of most groups being explicitly inclusive of us. So hopefully whatever groups you engage with or participate in are explicitly inclusive of you too, and that they don't carry around or give platform to people who have perspectives like this. Thanks for watching. I hope you tune in next time. Bye.